Come light it up, I'm ready to go. Come light it up, up, up. Come light it up, I'm ready to go. Come light it up,
Welcome to the last session of day one, Datanova 2024. And so I hope everyone that's had a chance to listen to most, if not all the presentations, got a lot of really good info. And this session will not disappoint. It's another session loaded with content. More than anything, it's loaded with experts. And so before I get into the detail, let me introduce our panel today. So first of all, we have Sanjeev Mohan. Sanjeev is the principal for Sanjo and former Gartner Research VP, Data and Analytics. Welcome, Sanjeev. We've done a few sessions together, so I think we're old friends. So nice to have you again. We also have Jessica McLeod. Jessica is from Kubrick. She's a delivery lead over at Kubrick, and Jessica and I have also had a few sessions together. Welcome back, Jessica.
Great to be here.
Awesome. We're also really happy to have Shelley Kramer. Shelley is the author of the research study that we're going to discuss. I'll introduce that here in just a second. But Shelley is also the managing director for Cube Research. And as I said, the author for the research study. Welcome, Shelley.
Thanks a lot. Great to be here.
Awesome. So Shelley, you wrote, or I should say, you wrote an article, but you also conducted a research study that we're going to discuss. This research study was titled "The State of Data Management: Success Hinges on Real-Time Data Access and Security." So there's a lot of great detail, a lot of great information in the research study. There's some numbers that jumped right out at me, and we're going to talk a lot about these facts and these numbers, but I want to just start the audience with just to level set a little bit on what I took away when I read the article. I'm going to read off my notes. You interviewed 300 different IT professionals. And what I found really interesting, and frankly, I think what gave this research study a tremendous amount of credibility, is out of those 300 people, I think 51% of those were CTOs. And so you were interviewing leaders. You certainly had, I think, another 25% were software engineers. And then the rest of it was a mix between data engineers and data architects. So you had a really good mix. So roughly 50% on the executive side and 50% more on the architecture engineering side. Love that mix. That gives us a really good balance. Walking away from the information, you summarized a couple of big points. One of them is that 87% of the respondents said they had a very strong to a very strong desire to implement AI, and that's not a surprise. That's something we hear everywhere. What I found also even more interesting, so 87% said yes, we're going to do it. 86% said we're already doing it, right? 86% seemed to say, and you can correct me when we get into the details, there was a quote there that said 86% were already making significant to very significant strides. That surprised me a little bit. I know when we talk to a lot of people, everyone wants to do it. There are a lot of people struggling, but to have 86% of the respondents believe that they were making positive strides, that's great. That's great. We'll talk more about why they're making those positive strides.
Yeah.
And even most telling, I think, was that 90% of the respondents felt that data management was critical, or that 90% of the respondents said that in order for this to be successful, data management had to be aligned with AI. And so I think that's a really core part, or maybe probably your core theme, Shelley. Do you agree?
Absolutely. And quite honestly, that's why we called this study the State of Data Management, because we know what's happening, across the business ecosystem. Everybody's in a mad rush to embrace AI more fully. By the way, AI isn't necessarily new, but Gen AI is fairly new and kind of causing many disruptions. And so, what we know to be true is that you can't have any success with AI without first getting your arms around data. And so that's really why we decided it was important to take a deep dive there.
Love it. It's something that I hear with every customer we talk to, every target, every conference, every session, is we got to get the data right. I think there are new modern ways to rethink about how we get the data right. I think some of the old approaches probably don't, they may still work, but the challenge is they may not be fast enough. The challenge is they may not cater to all the different needs. The challenge is because of all the changing and diversity of the use cases, they're not as efficient as they need to be. And I'm sure those are the details we'll get into. So let's jump into the first question. Let's hear some more from the rest of the audience. Let's talk more about this alignment. So as I said a second ago, we had a very high percentage. I think it was 87% that said that they have a very strong desire to implement AI in the next 12 months. And so obviously, Shelley, that gives us a really clear indication that this is the theme, so to speak, right? Everyone wants to run there. From what you're seeing today, are you confident that companies are set up to start their AI journey?
Well, I think that's a very broad question, right? And so some are. Some are much further along than other organizations are. Some are at the beginning stages. And so, I look at this a lot like this is not too dissimilar from, the digital transformation conversations that we've been having over the course of the last decade plus, right? You can't opt not to embark upon a digital transformation journey. I mean, you can, but if you expect your business to be around, that probably isn't an option. And I think the same is true as it relates to all things AI and integrating AI into business operations and being able to realize some of the benefits that people are looking for, whether it's improved efficiencies or speed to innovation or, being able to get real-time insights that help drive business decisions. I mean, all of those things is where data plays a super important role. And so I think we're seeing that from organizations and not everybody is in the same spot in this journey. Some are out in front of others and others are beginning on their journey. And a whole lot of people are in the beginning or middle entry stages. So I think that's pretty common.
Yeah, I mean, what I see is with everyone that I talk to, I think that competitiveness, right? The risk of losing, the risk of falling behind, and you said it right there, the risk of not being in business.
Yeah. That
to me is what I see the most when I talk to board level or C-level. From your article, the big why, 75% or 77% of your respondents said insight was a big thing, data insight. 87% said improved efficiency, and then 74% said better innovation. Sanjeev, what do you think? Are we ready to be successful? Are we ready to start that implementation?
So, Adrian, one of the interesting figures I took out from the survey is 87% of respondents said they showed strong intent to go implement AI. My question was, where are those 13%? What rock would I find them under? Because I'm not being facetious here. To me, this conversation is like people like in 1994 saying, should an organization have an email address?
I'm not going to need that.
Yeah, it's like, why do I need a website if I'm a serious business? It's a fad. In fact, a lot of people, actually important people, said it's a fad. So that's why. I think everybody should be looking at AI not as a sort of a stopgap arrangement, but to your point, in fact, you just mentioned, because if you don't adopt AI and your competition is adopting AI, then you're in serious trouble. Like they say, that you may not lose your job to AI, but you will lose your job to someone who is using AI. So same thing is for organizations, and that's my thinking about the importance of deploying AI solutions.
Yeah, I want to add to that. I think I was at a session last week, an AI session with a very innovative company in Asia. And I love the way they did their AI day. They balanced it with areas, so very impressive AI sessions. And then they followed it up with maybe like the Secretary of Education came up and talked about how they were going to apply AI in the education system in that country to upskill resources. Because if we were going to be a country that was innovative in AI, we needed the people. And so they needed to spread AI to the schools. And then later on in the session, there was talk about how they were going to use AI to extend some kind of a market that maybe you would think is not. These are people that don't usually have banks, people that work. They called like odd jobbers in Asia. It was a very for me the presentation was really, really impressive. But this is an underserved market on the AI side, and they were talking about how they were going to use AI to reach out to these people. And so I think even in areas, I don't know where that 13% is, but I'm with you. I think even in the areas that we would say, oh, they're not technical, or they're not technically literate, I think we're going to be surprised. I think AI is going to reach all of them very quickly, or probably faster than we expect. Jessica, what are your thoughts?
I think that's such an interesting point, and actually it's enabling us to develop and support groups that haven't been able to have these kind of problems resolved before. So I think that's a great point, Adrian. The 87% is definitely not a surprise. I think the challenge is not necessarily desire, but actually business readiness and capability to achieve that, right? I think that there's a big difference between having a really strong desire and intent, but it's how do you get there? And I think many companies are held back by legacy infrastructures, outdated process, and a lack of the necessary skills. So I think to implement AI effectively, there needs to be a stronger focus on defining a clear strategy to support that. For clients further along that journey, I think we are seeing results, but I also think, it's not a new concept we're seeing. As Shelley, you said, machine learning's been around since the 50s, data science since the 70s. So a lot of these concepts aren't new, but it has created a rush, and I think critical steps are being skipped. So I think conversations that we were seeing 5 years ago around the build versus buy debate are becoming quite central to a lot of discussions that we're seeing now, which I think is a really interesting shift where people are starting to pause. They've seen some success from their use cases. They're pausing and actually trying to focus on how do we actually get to that quickly and what do we need to do that. And I think it's a combination and questions like, do we build versus buy? Do I have the right skill set to implement? That are really important questions to achieve that desire.
By the way, Adrian, something very interesting that I've noticed, and I'd love to hear what Jess is seeing from her experience. Another point that came out in the survey was only 37% of respondents feel their data is AI ready or aligned. Shelley, correct me if I'm wrong. So, and that number does not surprise me. That number is shockingly low because a lot of organizations just don't know where their data is. So while we are talking about culture and skills and training and all of that, but if you don't even know where your data is. So one interesting thing I found out while talking to a number of customers is organizations that are very compliance heavy, like financial services, healthcare, are actually at an advantage to deploy AI because they have been dragged through this process of getting to understand their data compared to industries that don't have that heavy compliance regulation, like perhaps retail. So it's how tables have turned, that these companies that were accused of being behind in innovation because of compliance requirements are now at an advantage to deploy AI.
Yeah. I was really impressed. Well, let's talk about data management. That's kind of the next theme here. I sat down with a CIO for a big bank recently, and I hate to say the word impressed. That makes it sound like I didn't expect it, but I was impressed by the storytelling. Maybe put it to you that way, right? Mm-hmm. He presented to me a model, one which those of us maybe have seen before, former Gartner, Sanjay, you've seen it before. I'm sure Jessica and Shelley have as well. This model where you think about unknown data and unknown questions versus known data and known questions. Right. Everybody's seen that quadrant. Yep. He has used that quadrant, if you will, that model to describe to the board and to his leadership team the importance of data discovery, the importance of data management. So it isn't that in some cases we spent years already putting data into these structured warehouses. Like, well, I know where it is. The problem is for AI initiatives, for AI use cases, that's not the data they're looking for, right? They're re-asking the question. I need the raw data. I have a new question for new data. And so it kind of breaks the old data pipelines or the old models you have. And so you're almost going back to the source every time. Data management at the source is still important. And so let's talk about data management for a second. It's one of the challenges. Shelley, I'd love to get your thoughts on what you're observing day to day. See if you agree with Sanjeev have said.
Well, I agree with anything Sanjeev says pretty much ever.
We all do.
Actually, I'm kidding, but I'm not. So, I think that for me, when I step back and I look at the findings of the report, one thing was abundantly clear. People are incredibly eager to embrace, deploy, experiment with, learn from, and realize the value of their AI initiatives. More now than ever before, right? And as Sanjeev mentioned, there is a sense of urgency to do this. Your competitors are doing it. This is very much an instance of, time is money. Time is results. Time is delivering on better customer experiences. And so, I thought it was great to see that many respondents felt like they were making progress. I did feel like there were some disconnections there. And I think, Sanjeev, you sort of mentioned this as well. It's like, there's the desire, and so many people feel like they're making some great inroads. But I think that the reality of it is that, the path to AI success is not necessarily a short one. And it requires, it really requires solving for one really big thing, and that's data. And it's accessing your structured data and your unstructured data, and being able to manage that data, and what kind of a platform or a process do I use to manage that data, and who am I going to give access to that data? And all of those pieces, all of those things are pieces of a very big equation. And that is what people are really laboring within organizations today to solve, is what am I going to do about my data situation? So I think that, again, I'm very enthused to see such an embrace of all things AI and people wanting to move this forward. But I'm also incredibly glad to also see the spotlight turned on data, because data is everything, and we can't have any success with AI initiatives without really mastering the data part of the equation.
Yeah. We've all spent a lot of money on data management, data foundations. Any CDO out there probably spent, myself included, first 2 years of their CDO careers probably just on data governance. And so I think AI is kind of magnifying the small cracks or the fissures that existed in that foundation. Jessica, what types of cracks or issues are you seeing in those data foundations?
I think it is really down to data quality, data management. I think also people tend to forget about the adoption and the kind of cultural change elements. And actually that can be one of the biggest pieces and challenges of any rollout of any product. But I think really the criticality of data quality for, avoiding things like bias in the models you're building and hallucinations in your chatbots, actually creating incorrect insights is incredibly important, and it's a stage that cannot be skipped. So I think it's something that we should continue to focus and invest money into, because it's such a critical element of what we're seeing. I think the risk of AI implementation in domains like lacking that sufficient data context to train or fine-tune models is severe. So like I said, the risk of hallucinations and bias is something that we should all be trying to avoid.
Such a really good point. I think we're going to get into adoption here later in the session, data literacy, but I want to underscore something because I see a lot. It's, I remember a few years ago, I think it was a Gartner number that came out. I think it was something like less than 30% of executives trust the data in their reports. These were Power BI reports or dashboards, right? This is prior to the current AI craze, right? This is 3 or 4 years ago. They didn't trust the data then. And fast forward now, where we're trying to get them to trust the output of an AI engine. If they didn't trust the data then, and when we could at least do a better job of explaining what Power BI was doing, right? Or what the BI dashboard was doing today, we can't explain what the neural network is doing, right? We get some data that comes in and the AI engine does some magic with it, and here's your number, right? That's very hard to explain. And so I think, spot on, Jessica. I think the trust of the answer relies very much on the trust of the data that came in. And if we can't provide that lineage, then we're in trouble. It's going to be even harder to win. That number might be less than what it was 5 years ago. So yeah, fantastic point. Let's bring it back up to kind of like what people are doing that's working, right? Let's talk about some technical aspects. A number of these are discussed. You discussed a number of really good strategies. I like the way you broke those down. Shelley, there were a number of key strategies you broke down for how we're addressing the technical challenges. And so I'd like to kind of walk through those. Let's start with data accessibility. That's a big problem. And again, to be clear, there's two sides to this coin. Part of it is certainly having the access security. But the bigger part, I think, and see if you guys agree with me, we'll start with Jess first in a sec. The bigger challenge, I think, is actually You said it earlier, Sanjeev, getting people access to the data they want. And what I mean by that is, do I know where it is? Do I know that it's right? And is it complete, right? I remember back in my old days, I had an EVP of finance tell me, Adrian, why does it take 2 data engineers for me to get to my data? It's my data. Why can't I get to it? And so there's this big gap between the people that need data and the data where it sits. And so let's start with you, Jess. For that data accessibility problems, thinking about cloud data platforms and so forth and how that scales, how can you manage large volumes of data efficiently and still make it available to the people that need it in a rapid way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's where the build versus buy debate comes in really nicely, because I think there's a business criticality versus maturity complexity framework that you should assess your processes on. If there's a relatively simple process that you can implement a bought tool on and see time to value quickly, like Starburst being a great example of connecting up cloud and on-prem technology and being able to get insights from that data quickly. I think that's the questions we should be asking ourselves around those data and how we can get that time to value quickly. I think there's a lot of people wanting to get ahead and building their own solutions. It's not always the correct answer. And even generative AI is not always the right answer for every solution, right? I think I'm also seeing a trend of people trying to implement it because it sounds new, exciting, and yes, it is. But if it's not the right use case, you're not going to see the most value from that.
Right.
I love it. There was a point in time, I think, and this time is long gone, when we had the time as data leaders to sit in front of a board or a business executive team and say, I just need 2 years to get all my data into X. And once I get it there, you're going to love it. It's going to be painful, but you're going to love it when I get there. I remember giving a speech like that in 2016. 2024.
Now we have 2 months.
Yeah, that time is.
And Adrian, and you know what happened? The outcome of those 2-year-long projects was that we IT teams went and built a data warehouse. It took 2 years, millions of dollars, and then we threw it over the wall to the business side. The business people said, "Sorry, our requirements changed. Thank you, thanks, but no thanks. We're going back to Microsoft Excel."
Yeah. Excel. I thought you were going to say NT. For sure. No, I think
but I think
we didn't deliver on those promises. Sorry, Shelley.
No, that's okay. I think you actually you and Jess both made some really good points, and I think that Jess, you've touched on it a couple of times in the whole build versus buy part of the equation. And when I have conversations with vendor clients of ours, one of the things that they say is, my whole company is comprised of engineers. Of course they want to build it. That's what engineers do. We build things. But I think that in most instances, building it yourself is probably not the fastest time to value. It's not that's not how you get to best in class. I mean, working with trusted vendor partners who have pre-built solutions, not necessarily that, one size fits all, but there are becoming so many options out there that you could go with. And in many instances where, you'll have kind of a little sandbox where developers can play and test theories and those sorts of things. And to me, that's where you get not only interest and adoption, but that's where you shorten this time to value equation. And that's the thing that all of us have to answer to. All of us who are advocates of, embracing AI and Gen AI and really starting to understand the benefits that are possible and getting on a path to realize some of those benefits, all of that has to do with, adoption and getting it right and having, feeling trusting in, the governance part of the equation and all of that sort of thing. So I really think that this is an instance where trusted vendor relationships are really the path forward, in my opinion.
I love it. Well said. I trusted vendor relationships. What I take away from that is it's about the ecosystem, right? One of the things I always talk to customers about is we fit into your ecosystem, right? Any organization or any vendor out there that 2 years ago was saying, bring the data to me and then I'll manage it or I'll analyze it. Everybody has come back to where Starburst started, which is independent and open, right? And I think that's the way forward. Sanjay, can you talk to us a little bit about a federated data access strategy and how important that is?
Yeah. I was just thinking, Adrian, when you were saying how the thinking has now changed, instead of like sending data to some place, I have a certain key principles that I followed even before AI. And one of them is to minimize your data movement. Anytime you move data, you introduce a whole slew of issues. One has to do with compliance, security. I mean, maybe I already had rock solid security in my source system. Now you're telling me to move data to a centralized data lake house, or warehouse, or wherever it may be. Now I have to redo my security. I have latency because I'm moving data. So data gets produced. Now I have to wait for it to land into a target location. There's integration cost. So those are some of the reasons why my suggestion is to leave data where it has been created and bring analytics and now AI to that data. And that to me is a form of federation where you, and in some cases you may need to move data, like you need to enrich the data from multiple different sources, but by and large, if you can avoid it, it's also GDPR requires data minimization. So let's not make copies of data. Let's not have more silos of data. Let's use our analytics and AI intelligently to either do the analytics or train the models or fine tune the models where the data is. So that's the goal of a data federation. But data federation, like any technology, has trade-offs. And one thing that sometimes can cause a problem is when you are going to multiple places, because you're not moving data into centralized location, then you run into this pesky thing called the speed of light. Physics comes in the place, and performance could be an issue. But some of those things have now been addressed by these data federation technologies. They use intelligent caching, and they use like push down techniques, so they can push the analytics to where the data is and then join it in memory. So using columnar technologies in memory, caching, push down, data federation is now become a viable way of trying to access the data and do intelligence on it.
Yeah, solid. A lot to uncover there, and certainly we can talk more about the importance of bringing the compute to the data. I like the way you said that. It's not only more efficient, but in a lot of places, certainly in Europe and certainly across Asia, it's a requirement, right? Data sovereignty is important. You cannot move the data. Correct. And so having the flexibility and the optionality to manage data where it sits, like I said, it's not just more efficient, it's a requirement.
And Europe, by the way, takes a cake when it comes to compliance, but they're not the only ones now. Now, you just came back from Asia, right? So every country in Asia now has their own data residency laws.
Yep, for sure. And they're getting closer and closer to those EU requirements. And certainly on the US side, you know, any large financial institution working across Europe or Asia also has to abide. So it impacts all of us. Let's talk a bit about data governance. There was a lot, and as an old CDO, data governance always resonates. There was a lot, I think, in the research study on data governance. I think 58% of the respondents said, if I read this correctly, the implementation of robust data quality and observability tools help maintain high standards and data reliability. As I said earlier, we were talking, you know, you need to be able to trust the data. It's not just about reliability in the sense of, do I have the data? It's reliability in the sense of, do I trust the data? So, Shelly, tell me a little bit. I mean, how does the implementation of increased data governance, how does that kind of create a positive kind of downstream impact for AI teams and AI groups?
Well, I think that, you know, we talk about this often, and sometimes in the technology space, what we see from innovative vendors is a strategy of, you know, we're just going to move fast and break things and see what happens. And, Uber is a fantastic example. And, when Uber first came on the scene and started rolling out into cities across the United States, they didn't get permits. They didn't ask permission, or if they did ask permission and they didn't get permission, they still went into cities anyway. Airbnb is actually probably another good example of a new concept, a new technology firm that just said, we're going to do this. And people are going to just have to deal with it and get used to it. And I think that you can't do that with data. It doesn't work with data. You've got so many ethical considerations, and you've got, I've had situations before where I've just been tasked with trying to control a small team of analysts who wanted to jump on the AI train in the very, very early days of Gen AI, when we hadn't had a chance to get guardrails and policies and use cases and permissions and all of that sort of thing in place. And, the reality of it is somebody could completely unwittingly grab some intellectual property that belongs to the company and feed it into ChatGPT unwittingly, or some other platform. And so really understanding governance and risk mitigation, and how important keeping the company's data, its customer data, its employee data, its customer data, all of that is more important than it ever was before. And so I think that, from a governance standpoint, nobody talks about deploying AI initiatives without also talking about governance in the same breath. It's just a critical part of this conversation.
Love it. I'd love to do another show, maybe in a future Datanova, specifically around data governance. And I mentioned this at the very beginning. I'll just highlight it very quickly. I mentioned that we need to have new ways of thinking about data. I have the DM Bach book on my shelf, right? The Data Management Book of Knowledge. Yeah. And if I turn to the page on data governance, a lot of the stuff that we talk about in that book, which is still the Bible for CDOs, I think it's a little outdated. And part of the reason, I think, is because one of the big reasons for me is, I think in the more modern age of AI and data management, data analytics, I think we need to share ownership with the business. And so there's this idea of data stewards and data owners, and we need to start translating those terms to business owners. We'll not get into data products and that type of thing in this session, but there needs to be a stronger balance for ownership of data and quality and management with business teams. I think they understand the data better, and so I'll save that for a future session. But I think there's a lot there that we can benefit from. I want to come to you talking about real-time data access and quality, right? That's kind of one of the key themes as well in this research study. So there was, I think, 65% of those surveyed, Shelley, in your survey, believe that real-time data access is crucial for successful AI initiatives. Tell me a little bit, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I think it kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, in that problems that weren't able to be addressed are being able to be addressed now. I think what we need to understand is the real problems and pain points that people have been facing and they haven't been able to face before. Those kind of solutions normally need real-time responses. They need instant decision making. I think a good example of that is an electric grid company. There's a storm, an electric grid goes down. Their engineers need to be able to know where that's happened and what the resolution needs to be almost instantly. So we're seeing these kind of solutions coming into play that we haven't really seen before. And the reason why real time is so important to people is because exactly it's unlocking challenges to be able to re-resolve that just haven't been considered before. I think another example we've seen is the aviation industry. We've implemented a chatbot for maintenance teams using graph technology and Gen AI. It prioritizes maintenance work based on historical data, minimizes out of service events. So a plane needs to be serviced. They're able to see what the defect resolutions are. The business value of that is that a process that took hours, maybe weeks, to get a plane back in service can take minutes for them to get a resolution to that. So I think it's because the problems require that real-time solution that we need real-time data to address those problems.
There was a period of time when it took us months, if not, close to a year, to build out these big applications within our companies. Today, we can build AI solutions in minutes, or at least maybe in days. So the idea of it taking more time than that to get the data that we need is ridiculous, right? So you would say 90% of my project time is waiting for data. I can build a solution in a day if only I had the data. A lot of it starts to point to this open architecture, the idea of a flexible data infrastructure, kind of that's growing in popularity. Sanjeev, what are your thoughts there? How does that help?
The reason why we see things like retrieval augmented generation, RAG take off is because organizations want their most current data to feed to an LLM and then get the benefit of Gen AI. And that's why we are extracting data from all these other transactional systems and then creating a prompt. So I think having the most current data is a game changer. If you don't have the most current data, then you are making decisions on stale data by definition. Yeah. Why would you want to do that? And we've already established how important transformational Gen AI is and how it gives you competitive advantage. So that's why having fresh data becomes even more important with these modern solutions that we are putting in place.
And by fresh data, you mean access to that raw data, access to the data where it's in an open architecture. Okay.
Yes, and that is the reason why we talk about federation. We like shifting left, getting close to where the data is created is really important. And even if we are not there, but we are in a lake house, which is fine. But we have things like change data capture. So as soon as new data gets created in operational systems, we put it into Parquet files or iceberg tables, and we start doing analysis in near real time in an interactive way right away.
Love it. Let's move. So we've gone from talking about some of the technical strategies. Now I would like to talk a bit about the value side, right? And so for these AI initiatives, how do we begin to attach value to them? So it's exciting, right? 87% of the respondents said, we're going to do something. Great. There's 13% Sanjeev said are under a rock. But what's the value? How do we attach? And so Jess, I'd like to start with you. We talk about the kind of relationship between use case driven development. How would you recommend? How do you talk to your customers about attaching an ROI to these AI use cases? Yeah.
I know it sounds simple and I've referenced it before, but it really comes down to what the core pain points and challenges are that we're facing. It's definitely more complex than that, but it's that simple. It's what those problems are and how we need to get to that value. So I think like an example we're seeing is just sheer manual work that you'd see in investment banking, for example, on automating the creation of a pitch book deck that they used to stay up till 1, 2, 3 a.m. pulling together all this data manually. Now they can use RAG, as Sanjeev mentioned, to pull that data together instantly. So it's just identifying where the operational efficiencies, challenges, and pain points are to really drive that value.
Shirley, how does identifying that business outcome that Jess just described, how does that help us on the technology side?
Well, I think, a lot of the conversations that I'm having is that, this is a time when our CIOs and our CDOs and even our CISOs need to understand that this is not an IT conversation. This is a business conversation. This is that I need to be able to go into the boardroom and communicate to the chairman of the board and the rest of the board members and the CEO and the president of the organization and really speak to business value. That's what we're trying to deliver. We're trying to solve business problems. We're trying to deliver business value. But the reality of it is in every organization that I speak with, and I have these conversations all the time across many different verticals, but the people who are having the most success are not just wildly deploying AI throughout the organization. Not only are they lasering in on, let's decide where the real significant business value is. They're trying to get to, in some instances, it's not just a little bit of business value, it's where can we see the most significant results in the quickest amount of time, delivering the most significant bottom line business value. That's how you get to where we start. Those
Love
are and so it really is. And you have to resist and again, this is so similar to the journeys that we've all taken on the digital transformation front. These were the same conversations that you had, early on in the digital transformation days. And so these are conversations that we should be familiar with. But it really is all about resisting the urge to just go full speed ahead and to being very selective about picking out those business cases and being able to pick out, whether it's an internal business leader, a line of business, and find your early adopters. Again, this is exactly what we did in the early days of digital transformation. Find those people who are excited, find the business use cases that make sense, go off, do it, get your results, come back, share those results. And then before you know it, then you have all these other people knocking on your door, wanting to be a part of this magic that you're creating. But I think strategically, you really have to understand that it's not just where do we deliver business value? It's where do we deliver the most significant business value that's going to help us drive these initiatives forward in a more organized, more, bottom line profitable fashion.
Love it. I mean, I'm so grateful that agile methodologies came before AI, right? Can you imagine trying to push AI right now with the old waterfall approach? I mean, this is all about MVP, all about quick wins, all about building momentum with the teams that are ready to go. And I like the way you put it. Not every part of your company is ready to run, but you don't want the parts of your company that need to run, that are ready to run, that want to run. You don't want to slow them down. You want to give them the keys, so to speak. Sanjeev, if I final comment on this section before we go to the last statement, last point.
Yeah. So, Adrian, one of the mistakes that we made when we did digital transformation, as Shelley was saying, was that we over-indexed. We went very quickly to technology. It used to be we've got Oracle on Sun Microsystem. Now let's go figure out. More recently, we got Snowflake or Databricks and DBT. Same mistake we can make by saying now we've got Llama 3.2 as a model. Let's see what we can do. And exactly what both Shelley and Jess have said, we need to start with here are a list of business initiatives, and business initiatives could be our development velocity is too slow. So we need to look at these coding techniques through models, or it could be our customer service is falling behind in handling requests. So that could be another use case. So like that, we could have a list of use cases, and we go next to AI governance. AI governance is basically, let's document, here are the business pain points, here are the expected ROI if we were to do AI, do your experimentation, capture the results, do all your evaluations. So all this needs to be structured in AI governance. Data governance used to be an afterthought. After we built a data warehouse, we attacked it. So just having this structured process, which is led by business initiative and has governance built in right at get-go, is the road to success.
Fantastic. Last, I'll give everyone a final close here. If we were starting, I'm starting my AI journey today, and I come to you for advice, where would you tell me to start? So Jess, we'll start with you. A new leader comes to you and says, hey, I want to implement AI. What do you suggest I do? Where do I start?
Pick a small, mature, simple, business critical process that has key points attached, that is quick to deliver that MVP or that proof of concept and prove the value first. I think then you start to assess the broader questions and conduct sort of business criticality, complexity, governance, management, but don't try and do everything at once. I still think there is an element where we do need to jump in and figure it out, right? It's relatively new. We may have to fail in certain scenarios to understand what we're going to do better in the future. So I think the key thing is just picking that use case that you can develop and get to some value quickly, and then start to address those questions at a broader level, a more strategic level.
I love that you said at the very beginning, pick a critical business process. I think that, right, we're not building AI for technology. We're building AI to improve business process, business outcomes. So well said.
Yeah.
Sanjeev,
And people's experience, right? I think the adoption, the cultural change just stems to that too, right? If it's not helping that operational efficiency side and seizing the benefits there, then why are you doing it in the first place?
it's really tough if you're a new chief AI officer to figure out whether I'm being too conservative or whether I'm being too aggressive, taking too many risks. How do you find the balance, Sanjeev? How do you figure out what's best for your company? Am I too conservative or should I be more aggressive?
I think we need to take a long-term view of what we're going to do. There's very little premium paid these days in IT. I think it's probably why, like you see, the CDO roles change so quickly. So we're all trying to get a quick fix. But, we've talked for years about data products, although that's not the topic for this session. But having the product management... Sorry?
I said I wish it was my favorite topic, but it's good.
Yes, but I think it's still very important to recognize how important it is to have these product management discipline. Treat what you're going to do, what Jess explained, as a product, not as a one-off quickie project. Just have that discipline and to see it through, because the first time around it may not be a success, but that doesn't mean you give up. You have to keep refining it, and maybe it's a different model, maybe it's a different methodology you need to use, but take that long-term view.
So important. And I think we've said it a couple times, at least I've heard it a couple times in the session today, this idea of it's okay to make mistakes. I had a conversation with someone recently. We were talking about, they were saying, I cannot let my business fail. I don't want them to make mistakes. And I was arguing, I agree. You build them guardrails. They can hit the rails. You don't want them to drive off the cliff. But I think if they want to move fast, they got to figure out where those rails are. And they'll learn to drive faster. And I think that's really important right now for ideation in the AI space. Just to stay competitive is either you're leading and you're bumping against the guardrails to figure out how to drive faster. Data governance gives you the really good breaks, or you're behind the leader and you're driving slowly. You got to figure out what really is best for you. I think a lot of companies right now with the right set of guardrails are willing to drive a little bit faster. Yeah. Shelley, you gave a really good answer on the previous question that I think led into this notion of where do I start? And you talked about the importance of prioritizing. You talked about the importance of starting small, building a momentum, so to speak, building confidence, letting others. I always say you build a showcase, and other parts of the companies get jealous and they want to jump on board. Love the way that works. We haven't talked enough about, I think, is maybe the investment side. You're a new chief AI officer, and we want to drive AI initiatives. Any takeaways that you've seen work to help kind of organizations kind of maybe balance that investment side?
Well, I think that, for me, I think it's important to know that this is a strategic initiative, right? This is something, and so AI, in order to be successfI can't be an island within your organization. It can't be, there's our AI gal or our AI guy over here, and I don't know what they're doing. I mean, deciding to truly take a step in this age of AI and to use AI initiatives to help transform your business, which means having your data, manageable and accessible, and being able to grab those insights in real time and be able to trust those and apply those to help make better decision better business decisions and to increase productivity, all of those things that we want. This is just not something that one person or a small team of people are going to be off doing. AI needs to be something that is this is a business-wide strategic imperative that we are doing and we are embracing, and all of you, my employees, are part of this. And I think that, really working to create that mindset and to create a culture of this is where we are at this moment in our corporate journey. And we're embarking upon this path of AI-powered innovation, and everybody has a role to play here. And all ideas are welcome. And I think that, to me, doing that is really how you can set yourself on a path of success with your AI initiatives, because it's not something that just one person or a small group of people does for the whole organization. This is something that we all play a role in.
Can't think of a better way to close the session than with that, Shelley. Thank you so much for this really enlightening research study. And I thank Sanjeev and Jess as well for joining us on the panel. A lot of good context here. We were not given enough time. We didn't need 30 minutes. We needed 3 hours for the discussion, but I hope that this kind of gets the conversation going, certainly gets people thinking. I certainly encourage people to go out, take a look at the article. There's so much more there that we didn't have a chance to cover, but I hope you've enjoyed Datanova. This is the end of day 1, and so please join us back tomorrow for the start of day 2. Thank you to the panel. Have a great evening.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.